The weight of my father's casket still lingered in my palms when my phone vibrated in my suit pocket. I shouldn't have checked it. Not there. Not with my mother's quiet sobs cutting through the cemetery silence. But 12 years of running a tech company had conditioned me to respond to every alert. You've been removed from all company accounts. The email's subject line burned into my retinas, bright and accusatory, against the black background of my phone. I scrolled down, my thumb suddenly numb. Dear Nathan, as discussed in previous board meetings, your prolonged absence has necessitated a restructuring. Effective immediately, you've been removed from all company systems, accounts, and facilities. Your personal belongings will be shipped to your address. Regards, James Walker, CEO, Quantum Tech Solutions. The digital signature at the bottom, the one I'd seen on thousands of contracts we'd celebrated together, now marked the execution of a plan I'd known was coming. My father's half-lowered casket waited a few feet away, and somewhere beyond the small gathering, my business partner was dismantling 15 years of my life. The priest's voice faded into white noise. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, feeling the weight of another device pressing against my chest, a USB drive tucked into my inner jacket pocket. The dirt beneath my shoes felt suddenly unsteady. Someone touched my shoulder. My sister, her makeup streaked by tears, silently asking if I was okay. I nodded, straightening my posture. I returned to the moment, watching as they lowered my father's body into the earth. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, took a handful of soil, and let it fall from my fingers. I won't let you down, I whispered, words meant only for my father. As everyone slowly dispersed, collecting in small groups of quiet conversation, I remained standing at the edge of the grave. The sky had turned a muted gray, the spring air carrying just enough chill to keep everyone uncomfortable. I smiled slightly and whispered, "Perfect timing." My mother approached, her fragile frame somehow still holding strength. "Nathan, are you coming to the house? Everyone's gathering there." "I'll be there. I just need a moment," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. When she left, I pulled out my phone again and made a single call. "Marcus, it's time." Open the envelope marked contingency. Yes, today. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was focused. James hadn't just timed his betrayal for when I was vulnerable. He'd timed it for when he thought I'd be too broken to respond. He didn't know that my father, in his final months, had taught me one last lesson about preparation and patience. The USB drive felt warm against my chest. It wasn't for the grave, after all. It was for what came next, the hollow echo of our footsteps against the concrete floors of an empty warehouse. That's how Quantum Tech began. James and I had met at Stanford, he with his MBA and slick presentations, me with my engineering background and 3 patents already pending. We weren't friends at first. Competitors, actually. It wasn't until our 3rd year, when a professor paired us for a project, that something clicked. "You know," James had said after our first successful prototype, "we might actually be unstoppable together." I believed him. We complemented each other, my technical mind against his market instinct. We took the prototype, refined it, and launched our company with just enough funding to rent that empty warehouse in Palo Alto. For 2 years, we slept on office couches, ate ramen, and coded until our eyes burned. Our first major contract came on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember, because we were down to our last $4,200 in the company account. "We did it, Nathan." James had grabbed me in a bear hug when the signed contract arrived. "This is just the beginning." He was right. By year 5, we employed 50 people. By year 8, over 200. Our enterprise security systems protected data for Fortune 500 companies. I handled development. James handled growth. We moved into sleek offices in San Francisco and finally paid ourselves salaries that didn't require roommates. Dad visited the office once during a rare remission in his first cancer battle. He'd walked around silently, nodding at the employees, examining the awards on the walls. "Are you watching the finances?" he asked later at dinner. "James handles that side," I'd replied. "He's got the business degree." Dad had given me a look. I wouldn't understand until years later. Having the degree isn't the same as having integrity. Check the books yourself once in a while. I dismissed it as the paranoia of a man who'd lived through the Depression. James and I were brothers in us, everything but blood. The first hairline fracture appeared 3 years ago. Small decisions made without me. Meetings rescheduled when I was traveling to visit my father. New hires in the financial department that I'd never interviewed. "Just streamlining," James would say. You've got enough on your plate with product. When Dad's cancer returned, more aggressive this time, the fractures widened. I spent 2 weeks at the hospital with him and returned to find a reorganization underway. My direct reports now had dotted lines to James. Temporary, he assured me, until things settle down with your dad. I noticed James changing passwords more frequently, conference room blinds drawn during certain meetings, whispered conversations. That stopped when I approached. Still, loyalty and 15 years of friendship kept me from confronting him directly. The night Dad told me he was refusing further treatment, I stayed late at the office, unable to face my empty apartment. That's when I found the preliminary acquisition paperwork in the shared printer queue. Quantum Tech was being positioned for sale, with terms that would dilute my shares to almost nothing while preserving James's controlling interest. I removed the papers from the tray, made copies, and left them where I found them. That night, I didn't sleep. I stood at my apartment window watching the San Francisco fog roll in, thinking about what Dad had always told me: prepare for rain while the sun shines. The next morning I called Marcus Grayson, our outside counsel from the early days, who'd been inexplicably transitioned to another firm the previous year. I need a favor, I told him. Off the books. Does this have anything to do with why I'm no longer invited to your quarterly reviews? He asked. I think it might have everything to do with it. That conversation sparked 6 months of quiet preparation. I documented irregular financial transfers. I backed up emails showing James's communication with our competitors. I kept 2 sets of notes, one visible on the company servers, another private and encrypted. As Dad's condition worsened, my resolve strengthened. I wasn't just fighting for my company anymore. I was fighting for the legacy I'd built while he watched proudly from a distance. The night before he died, Dad gestured me closer to his hospital bed. The documents, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the machinery keeping him alive. Did you sign them? I nodded. Yesterday. The trust is established. Everything's protected exactly as we discussed. His thin hand grasped mine with surprising strength. Then you're ready. I wasn't sure if he meant ready for his death or ready for what would come after. Perhaps both. The next morning, as dawn broke over the hospital parking lot, I received the call from my sister. He was gone. 3 hours later, James sent a company-wide email expressing condolences and announcing that he would temporarily assume all operational duties during my bereavement. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I was quiet, reserved, the grieving son, and distracted executive, exactly as I needed him to believe I was. The gathering at my mother's house after the funeral was a blur of sympathetic faces and hushed conversations. I moved through it mechanically, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming. My phone, now silenced, continued to vibrate in my pocket. Likely IT confirmations of my removed access, or perhaps James checking if I'd gotten his message. Excused myself to my father's study, now a shrine to his methodical mind. Engineering books lined the shelves, organized by subject. His drafting table still held his last project, a refinement to a water filtration system he'd been developing for rural communities. I locked the door, pulled out my personal laptop, not my company one, and connected to a private network. Nathan, you there? Marcus's voice came through my earbuds. I'm here. What's the status? James moved faster than we anticipated. The board meeting has been moved up to tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. They're calling it an emergency succession planning discussion. The leather of my father's chair creaked as I leaned back. He's not wasting any time. He's filed the preliminary acquisition paperwork with Nexus Corp. The terms are worse than we thought. Your shares would be classified as non-voting in the new entity. I opened my father's desk drawer and removed a small key. Have you spoken with Angela? Yes. Your CFO is very disturbed by what she's found. She's compiled all the evidence of the financial diversions. 15 million moved through shell companies in the last 2 years alone. And she's still willing to testify to the board? She is. She feels responsible for not catching it sooner. I fused the key to open the false bottom of my father's old cigar box. Inside was another USB drive, a backup. What about the patents? The ones filed under my name? Safe, Marcus. Confirmed. James can't touch those. The trust your father helped you establish owns them now, not you personally. James has no idea. A gentle knock on the door interrupted us. Nathan? My mother's voice. Are you all right in there? Just a minute. Mom, I called back, then lowered my voice. Marcus, execute phase 1 now. I'll meet you at your office at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I disconnected, tucked the laptop away, and opened the door. My mother stood there, concern etched into her face. You don't have to be strong all the time, she said, straightening my tie unnecessarily. Not today. I kissed her forehead. Dad taught me that sometimes being strong means knowing when to be patient. There are still some people who want to say goodbye, she said. I nodded and followed her back to the living room. For the next 2 hours, I played the role of grieving son perfectly. Because it wasn't a role, I was devastated by my father's loss. The difference was that I was channeling that grief into absolute clarity. At 11 p.m., when the last guests had gone, I sat with my mother in the kitchen drinking tea neither of us wanted. He left something for you, she said suddenly. He made me promise not to give it to you until after. She couldn't finish the sentence. She went to the kitchen drawer and removed an envelope with my name written in my father's precise engineer's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a string of numbers and letters that I immediately recognized as access credentials, and a short note. Nathan, the best defense is built before it's needed. Server access, 192.168.1.72. The password is the name of the star we observed on your 10th birthday. Everything is there. Dad. My father, the retired electrical engineer who'd never fully trusted the cloud, had maintained his own secure server. And apparently he'd been collecting his own insurance policy. That night, from my childhood bedroom, I logged into my father's private server. What I found there was beyond anything I'd expected. My father had been quietly monitoring Quantum Tech's public financial disclosures, cross-referencing them with industry reports. He'd compiled a detailed analysis, showing systematic irregularities going back 3 years, precisely when James had begun excluding me from financial decisions. Dad had even documented meetings between James and executives from Nexus Corp, dating back 18 months, long before any acquisition talks should have begun. There were photographs time-stamped and geotagged. The final folder, labeled simply Nathan, contained something else entirely: detailed instructions for rebuilding should everything fall apart, contingency plans, industry contacts, even seed investment options from my father's old colleagues who'd expressed interest in backing me if I ever went solo. As dawn approached, I sent a series of encrypted messages, one to Marcus, one to Angela, our CFO, and one to Director Chen, the head of our engineering division, who'd been increasingly sidelined by James's new management team. The messages were identical and brief. Boardroom, 8 a.m. Before James arrives, bring everything we discussed. And I showered, dressed in my best suit, not the one from the funeral, and drove to the office where I'd spent the last 15 years building something I was proud of. My keycard didn't work, of course, but Angela was waiting at the side entrance. I'm sorry, she said immediately. Don't be. You're helping make it right. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. I've been going through the books all night. It's worse than we thought. Nathan. He's been moving intellectual property to a holding company in his wife's name. I know, I said calmly. She blinked in surprise. You do? My father knew, and he made sure I would know too when the time came. The surprise that flickered across her face was quickly replaced by determination. Then let's go. The others are waiting. I wasn't angry. I was prepared. The conference room felt smaller than I remembered, or perhaps it was just crowded with tension. Angela sat to my right, a stack of financial documents before her. Marcus stood by the whiteboard, legal pad in hand. Director Chen paced by the window, checking his watch repeatedly. James will be here in 30 minutes, Chen said. He's bringing the Nexus Corp executives and their legal team. I nodded, connecting my laptop to the projection system. Then we have 25 minutes to prepare the board. The board members filed in one by one, 5 people who had overseen our company's meteoric rise. Some looked confused to see me. There, others wouldn't meet my eyes. Only Diane Winters, our longest-serving board member, approached me directly. Nathan, she said quietly, I didn't know about moving the meeting up. They told us you'd requested time off. I'm sure they told you many things, I replied. When all were seated, I remained standing. Thank you for coming early. Before James and the Nexus team arrived, there's something you need to see. For the next 15 minutes, we presented a devastating case. Angela walked through the financial diversions, company funds methodically siphoned into entities controlled by James. Marcus detailed the legal violations, including breach of fiduciary duty and corporate espionage. Chen confirmed that critical, intellectual property had been quietly transferred away from the company. "This is the acquisition deal James will present to you today," I said, displaying the document on screen. "You'll notice it values the company at $340 million. However," I clicked to the next slide, "these are the preliminary terms Nexus offered 3 months ago, valuing us at $580 million. Board member Jefferson leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "James is selling your company, our company, at a $240 million discount. The difference will flow through various shells to a holding company called Meridian Ventures. Here's the ownership structure of Meridian." The next slide showed James's wife as the primary stakeholder. The room fell silent. I let them absorb it. "How did you get this information?" asked board member Yoshida. I placed the USB drive on the table. "I've been collecting evidence for 6 months, but some of it came from an unexpected source. I wouldn't tell them about my father's role. That remained private." Diane Winters, whose 30 years in tech had made her unshockable, finally spoke. "What do you want us to do, Nathan?" "Vote no on the acquisition. Remove James as CEO, effective immediately. Allow me to assume control while we conduct a full forensic audit." Jefferson shook his head. "If we back out now, Nexus could sue us for breach of contract." "There is no contract yet," Marcus interjected. "Only a letter of intent which contains an explicit material disclosure clause. This," he gestured to the screen, "qualifies as non-disclosure of material information." The sound of voices in the hallway signaled James's arrival. I took a deep breath. "It's your decision," I told the board, "but make it knowing the full truth." The door opened. James entered, flanked by 3 Nexus executives and their counsel. His confident smile faltered when he saw me. "Nathan," he recovered quickly, "this is a surprise. We didn't expect you given your circumstances." "Clearly," I replied. James approached me, lowering his voice. "This isn't appropriate. You're not thinking clearly. We can discuss your concerns later in private." I met his gaze steadily. "I've never been thinking more clearly." He glanced at my laptop, still connected to the projector, then at the faces of the board members. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Whatever he's told you," James addressed the board, "remember that Nathan is under enormous personal stress. His judgment is compromised." "Interesting theory," I said. "Why don't we put it to the test?" I turned to the board. "I move for an immediate vote on the proposed acquisition and a concurrent vote on leadership." What followed was the longest 45 minutes of my professional life. James attempted to dismiss the evidence as fabrications, attacked my character, suggested my grief had driven me to sabotage the company. The Nexus team tried to leave twice. Diane Winters ordered security to ensure they stayed. When the votes came, they were unanimous. The acquisition rejected. CEO status of James Walker terminated. Interim CEO appointment of Nathan Hayes confirmed. As James was escorted from the building, he hissed at me, "You can't prove any of it. It'll be your word against mine." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The evidence wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to the board, to our legal team, and as of this morning to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I wasn't seeking revenge, just restoration. 1 year later, I stood alone at my father's grave. The polished granite headstone reflected the afternoon sun, casting a warm glow over the engraved words, "Robert Hayes, engineer, father, man of principle." I placed a small bouquet of white lilies, his favorite, against the stone. We finished. "The audit," I said aloud, though no one was there to hear. 15 years of building something and it almost disappeared in a day. The breeze rustled through the oak trees overhead. In the distance, a groundskeeper worked quietly among other graves. "The company's different now," I continued. "Smaller. Focused. We lost some people who couldn't weather the storm, but those who stayed, they're the right ones." I hadn't wanted to remain CEO after the crisis passed. The board had insisted, at least until we stabilized. It took 6 months to untangle the financial web James had woven, another 3 to settle. With investors who'd been misled. The criminal case against James was ongoing. He'd fled to non-extradition countries twice before being apprehended. The evidence was overwhelming, but the legal system moved slowly. I had stopped following the case updates daily. Some things needed to be released. "Remember that filtration project you were working on?" I asked the silent stone. "We funded it. There are 3 villages in Rwanda using the system now. The Robert Hayes Foundation for Engineering. Ethics had become my personal mission, separate from quantum tech. We sponsored scholarships, funded practical innovations for underserved communities, and, perhaps most importantly, taught business ethics alongside technical skills. I sat on the grass beside the grave, not caring about my suit pants. "Bought back the cabin at Lake Tahoe," I said. "The one we lost when I was in college. Mom's going up there next weekend. Says she wants to see the stars again." After all the chaos, I'd found myself drawn to simpler things. I'd moved from my downtown apartment to a modest house with a workshop in the garage. I'd started dating again, a biology professor named Elena, who had no interest in the tech world and who challenged me in ways that had nothing to do with business. The largest change was inside. The betrayal had broken something in me, but the rebuilding had created something stronger, more resilient, more human. "Quantum tech is being approached for acquisition again," I told the headstone. "A legitimate offer this time. If it goes through, I'm stepping away completely, starting something new, something smaller, a handful of engineers solving interesting problems." I traced my finger along the engraved letters of my father's name. "You were right about watching the finances," I said with a small smile. "But you were right about something else too. The best defense isn't just built before it's needed. It's built on principles that can't be compromised." I stayed until the shadows lengthened across the cemetery. When I finally stood to leave, I placed the USB drive, the one that had saved everything, on top of the headstone. "I don't need this anymore," I said. "Its purpose is complete." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor. "Dinner at 7? I typed back, "On my way." The wounds had healed, not into perfect smoothness, but into something textured and strong. I had been betrayed at my lowest moment, but that betrayal had ultimately revealed what mattered most. I wasn't the only one. James had tried to destroy, but I was the one who had rebuilt something better from the ashes.